Joining us now to talk more about the momentous hearing and vote is David Levine with the Alliance for Securing Democracy. David, thank you for being here with us this weekend. Former President Trump has long criticized the committee for not letting him testify. He's even echoed it in a recent post on Truth Social after Thursday's committee voted to subpoena him, criticizing them for waiting so long to ask him to testify. But with all that being said, is there actually any chance that he will testify?
You know, certainly the perception, and I think it's also reality, is that there's very little likelihood that the former president will testify. But I think, more importantly than that, if the former president has any evidence to support his continuous false assertions about the 2020 election and his continued efforts to try and destroy American democracy, now would be the time for him to step forward. Accept the subpoena, come before the committee, and provide any receipts he's got. And I think the American people, if they don't see him do that, they ought to be able to draw their own conclusions from that.
Right, from that decision. So still, though, after being subpoenaed, Trump did continue to propagate false claims of an illegitimate 2020 election. Do you worry about the overall impact that these continued over and over false claims will have on the democratic process in the upcoming midterms, which are just a few weeks away?
I do, and for a few reasons. Number one, we've seen that the mis and disinformation that fueled efforts to overturn the 2020 election sadly are continuing. And we've seen those efforts result and contribute to threats against my former election officials and colleagues. We've seen it manifest itself into widespread efforts to try and persuade Americans of the illegitimacy of American elections. And there continues to be a certain chunk of the American population that believes falsely that the 2020 election was stolen. And of course, some of the mis and disinformation that the president and his former supporters have propagated have fueled election laws in a number of states that frankly aren't supported by evidence. So it's certainly a concern to me, and it's something I and many others are keeping a close eye on as we get closer and closer to November.
Yeah. And also, with all the evidence that the bipartisan January 6th committee presented and the amount of judges, politicians, attorneys, experts, and even Trump associates who have repeatedly rebuked and debunked the false election claims, do you think any Americans or most Americans still have confidence in American elections? And what can we do to just restore that overall trust?
Sure. Well, Lindsay, I should first say that we've seen research and polling that does suggest that majorities of Americans continue to have confidence in American elections. There is an important group, a minority of Americans who do not, but there are large majorities that still do. And one of the things that some of the polling and research has shown is that some of the folks who have concerns have genuine questions about the process, but they aren't foregone conclusions to be continuously supporting rigged elections. And so, for those folks, I think it's important to continue to reach out to them, to try and get them to be involved in the process, either through voting, serving as election workers, potentially serving as observers, so that they can see with their own eyes how elections are run. I think for those who continue to and have demonstrated that they have no interests in seeing and understanding how American elections are run, I think it's important that safeguards are put in place to make sure that those actors are mitigated. And I wrote a paper a few weeks back at the end of September talking about some efforts election officials could take to try and counter potential rogue actors that try to join the poll worker ranks. It's important to make sure that those folks are identified, and if they happen to get themselves into the poll worker ranks, that they are overseen by folks who are willing to put free and fair elections above any partisan interests.
All right, David Levine, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your insight on this.
Lindsay, my pleasure.